He would have walked past her entirely if the floor scrubber hadn't stalled. Callum Renwick had come to the Renwick pavilion that night to shake 90 hands and say the same 6 sentences about legacy, and he was already 3 minutes behind. The atrium smelled like lilies and warm wine. Somewhere behind him a string quartet was working through something soft enough to ignore. He was crossing toward the elevators when the machine coughed, whined, and died, and the woman pushing it crouched down to jiggle the cord out of the wall. She was in navy scrubs. Housekeeping navy, not nursing navy. He knew the difference because he had chosen the fabric supplier himself 4 years ago in a meeting he barely remembered. Her hair was pulled back and pinned with a plastic clip. Her hands were red at the knuckles the way hands get when they've been in disinfectant for months. And on her left wrist, riding loose over the bone, was a hospital wristband. Not a new one. It was gray with handling, the printed ink worn to a smear. The plastic softened the way plastic goes when it has been worn through 11 months of showers and dishwater and winter. He knew that band. He had watched a woman refuse to cut it off in a kitchen in Leaside because a 9-year-old boy had asked her to keep it, and she had promised, and she was the kind of person who kept a promise made to a child on the worst day of his life. The champagne flute went out of Callum's hand. He didn't feel it leave. It broke on the terrazzo and the sound went up through 4 stories of glass atrium and came back down again, and the quartet stopped and every face in that room turned. She didn't turn. That was the part that took the air out of him. She reached for the shards with a paper towel on her knees on the floor of a hospital with his family's name carved into the limestone above the door. "Maren," he said. She stopped. Her shoulders came up, just slightly, the way a person braces on the sidewalk when they hear a car coming too fast behind them. Then Maren Doyle looked up at her husband and there was no surprise in her face at all. Only calculation. Only the quick flat arithmetic of a woman deciding how much this was going to cost her. For 11 months he had rehearsed 100 versions of this. In none of them had she looked at him like a bill arriving early. She was thinner. Not gaunt, but scraped down, the way you get when the body starts spending itself. And her body had spent itself. He could see it in her face, the softness under the eyes, and in the way she stood up with one hand pressed briefly to her lower belly and then took it away, embarrassed, as though the gesture had betrayed something. He had one thought and it arrived whole and terrible. She had the baby. She had the baby and she had it somewhere he had never been. She had gone on a Tuesday. That was the thing he could never make anyone understand. Not a Friday after a fight, not a holiday, not the night of the Christmas party where his mother had made a joke about the wine Maren brought. A Tuesday in March, freezing rain, garbage day. She had put the green bin out. That detail wrecked him for months. Whatever she had been running from, she had still stopped in the mudroom, pulled on his old boots and dragged the green bin to the curb. Because it was Tuesday. He'd left at 7 that morning. He remembered kissing the top of her head and not her mouth, because he was on a call. When he came home there was no note, no missing suitcase, no drawer pulled out. Her purse was gone. Her phone was off by 8:30. Her bank card was never used again. Not once in 11 months. The bank flagged the account as dormant and sent a letter to the house, and Callum kept the letter in his desk drawer for reasons he could not have defended. He hired people. He hired the best people, a retired staff sergeant with a private license and a Bay Street rate. 2 weeks in, the man sat across from him and said gently, that women who leave like this are usually running from something specific, and asked whether Callum could think of anything. Callum could not. That was his answer. He said no and he believed himself, and that no would sit in his throat like a swallowed pin for the rest of his life. His mother came to the house on the 3rd day. Rosalind Renwick arrived the way she always did, without knocking, because she had a key and had never once been told she couldn't use it. She stood in the front hall in her camel coat with the snow melting off her shoulders and she said, "Not she's missing. Gone, like a coat left on a chair." "Gone, you don't know that," Callum said. "I know that girl," his mother said. "I always knew what she was. Nursing. Honestly, Callum, you could have had anyone. He should have thrown her out of the house. He knows that now, the way you know a thing after it stops being possible to act on." Instead he had gone into the kitchen and made 2 coffees. Because he was tired and she was his mother and it was easier. That was the whole architecture of his marriage. In one kitchen in 3 minutes, he just couldn't see it yet. 11 months is long enough to build a story out of anything. By month 4 he was telling himself she'd left. By month 7 he was telling himself she'd left him for someone, because that was cleaner than the alternative. By month 9 he was letting Rosalind seat him beside women at dinners, and he was smiling at them, and hating himself in the car afterward without being able to say why. And now his wife was on her knees in the atrium of the Renwick pavilion, picking up his broken glass with a paper towel, and every single person at that gala was watching. His mother reached them first. Rosalind Renwick came across the terrazzo in dove gray, and she did not raise her voice, because she never had to. She stopped an arm's length from Maren and looked at her the way a woman looks at a stain on a rented tablecloth. "Get up," Rosalind Renwick said. "You're making a scene." Maren stood. She had the wet paper towel in her fist and glass in it, and she didn't put it down. I'm working, Maren said. Yes. Rosalind let the word sit. I can see that. Behind her, the crowd had done the thing crowds do, turned themselves into a wall while pretending to be furniture. A young resident by the coat check held a plate of nothing. A board member's wife lifted her phone and, catching Callum's eye, lowered it again. Rosalind glanced down at the scrubber, at the wet track it had left across the floor, at the gray wristband. There's a service entrance, she said. There's always been a service entrance. I'd have thought you'd know that by now. Something in Callum's chest, a thing that had been rusted shut for a very long time, moved. He had spent 11 months waiting to feel rage at Maren. He had practiced it, he had built it, and the rage arrived Seischkol and turned in midair and pointed itself the other way. Mother. Rosalind kept her eyes on Maren. Don't say her name. Now she looked at him. There was a flicker, a fast, ugly private thing that came and went before anyone else in that room could have caught it. Callum, this is a fundraiser. Say her name. This is not the place. He turned. Not to his mother. To the room. He was aware distantly that he was standing in front of 200 donors with wine on his shoe, and that this would be in the Star by Sunday, and he found he did not care in the slightest. This is Maren Doyle, he said. She is my wife. The atrium made a sound, not a gasp. Something smaller and more shameful. The sound of people rearranging what they already knew. She is not staff, Callum said. She is my wife. And most of you knew, and you let her mop this floor. Nobody moved. The quartet cellist was holding her bow off the strings like she'd forgotten she had arms. Rosalind Renwick smiled. It was a good smile. It was the smile she wore in the annual report. She was your wife, she said. She is my wife. She abandoned you, and there it was. The sentence he had been repeating to himself in the dark for the better part of a year, arriving now in his mother's mouth, in his mother's voice, and sounding from outside his own skull, exactly like what it was. He watched Maren's hand tighten on the paper towel until a bead of blood came through it. You're bleeding, he said. It's fine, Maren said. It isn't. Everything is fine, Maren said, and it came out so flat and so practiced that Callum understood all at once and far too late. That he was listening to a sentence she had said to keep herself safe hundreds of times, in rooms he had never seen. The night housekeeping supervisor, a heavy, kind-faced man named Terrence Boyd, arrived at a half-run with his lanyard swinging. He looked at Maren, he looked at Callum, he looked at Rosalind Renwick, and his face did the calculation that every hourly employee in the world learns to do in under a second. Miss Doyle, he said, why don't you take your break? I've got 2 floors left. Take your break, Callum said. Maren's head snapped around and there was something in her eyes then that was not fear at all. Don't, she said very quietly. Don't do that. Don't walk in here after 11 months and start rearranging my shift. He put his hands up, palms out, and stopped. Behind him his mother said, you see what she is. Callum did not turn around. He was watching Maren's face and he saw the moment the words landed and he saw her decide not to bleed where anyone could see it. Terrence, Maren said, I'll take 10. She walked. She left the scrubber in the middle of the floor and she walked toward the service corridor with her spine straight. And she did not look at anybody, and the crowd opened for her, and Callum Renwick followed his wife out of the room his family had paid for. The corridor behind the atrium had a different smell. Bleach and hot dryer lint and, faintly, the industrial cinnamon of a wall dispenser. The tile was scuffed gray. Overhead a fluorescent tube ticked. The gala noise thinned out behind 2 doors, and then it was gone entirely and there was only the low grind of the laundry in the basement coming up through the floor like a heartbeat. There was a room at the end with a laminate table, 2 chairs, a kettle and a laminated sign about hand washing. Maren sat down and put her hands flat on the table and looked at them. Callum stood in the doorway. Can I come in? She looked up. The question had confused her. He watched it confuse her, and it was the worst moment of his life to that point, because it meant nobody had asked her permission for anything in a very long time. It's not my room, she said. I'm asking anyway. She nodded once. He came in and sat across from her and kept his hands on the table where she could see them, and he never afterward understood how he'd known to do that. You had the baby, he said. Maren didn't answer. Maren, yes. He put his hand over his mouth. He was aware of a sound trying to get out of him and he was not going to let it, not here, not in front of her, not when she had done all of it alone. When? 11th of December. His voice broke into pieces and he gathered it up. Is she okay? She, Maren said. She's fine, she's asleep at my friend Fatima's, on Danforth. She's got a cold, she's fine. What's her name? Maren looked at the wall. Ren. He had not cried in front of another human being since he was 14 years old. He did not cry now, but only because there was nothing left in him to do it with. Why, he said. Just Maren. Why? And his wife looked at him with such enormous exhaustion that he understood he had asked the wrong question for 11 months. You were never going to believe me, she said. About what? Ask a better question. He sat there. The kettle ticked as it cooled. Down the hall a cart went by with a bad wheel. About my mother, he said. Maren closed her eyes. She told it in order, because that was the only way she could get through it. And because she had been a triage nurse for 9 years and she had learned to give a history cleanly no matter what it cost. Rosalind Renwick had come to the house at 8:15 in the morning, on the Tuesday 20 minutes after Callum's car pulled out. She let herself in. Maren was at the kitchen table with ginger tea and soda crackers, because she was 7 weeks along and everything smelled like metal. The test was in the recycling. That was the mistake. It was in the blue bin under a flyer, and Rosalind Renwick, who had never in her life put anything in a bin, saw the corner of the box. She lifted it out. She held it up. Absolutely not, she said. Not congratulations, not does he know. Maren said she'd told her it was true, that she was going to tell Callum that night. That maybe, and Rosalind Renwick had laughed. A small, private, indulgent laugh. The kind you give a child who has said something charming and stupid. Then she opened her handbag and took out a file folder. She had a report, Maren said. 3 pages, letterhead, my name on it, my date of birth, my health card number. A psychiatric assessment. Signed. Callum's mouth had gone completely dry. Signed by who? Julian Vance. He knew the name the way you know your own street. Dr. Julian Vance sat on the ethics committee of Renwick Health. He had spoken at the ribbon cutting 8 months ago. He had a photograph with Callum on his office wall. I've never met him, Maren said. Not once, not in my life. There's a page in that report, this 40-minute session in his office on a day I was working a double at the Grace. She said it steadily. That was the horror of it, how steady she was. Emotional dysregulation. Persecutory, ideation. Concerns regarding capacity. She put it on my kitchen table, Maren said, next to the crackers. And she said, if you stay, this goes in front of a judge. And no court in this province is going to hand a baby to a nurse with a psychiatric file over a family like ours. That's not, his voice came out wrong. Maren, that's not, she can't, no lawyer would. And Maren Doyle looked at her husband and said mildly, I know that now. I had $420 in a jar and no lawyer, and a woman standing in my kitchen holding a document with my health card number on it. Where do you think she got my health card number, Callum? He didn't answer. So then she said the other thing. She said, and if you tell him, I'll simply tell him you're lying. Maren tipped her head. And that's the sentence I couldn't get past, because I stood there and I ran it. And I knew that you'd have picked up the phone and called her. Not out of cruelty. You'd have called her to clear it up. You'd have said, Mum, there's obviously been a misunderstanding. And she'd have said, Callum, the poor girl's not well, look at what she's accusing me of. And you'd have looked at me across the kitchen, and you'd have hesitated. Callum said nothing, because to say anything would have been a lie, and something in him had run out of lies 20 minutes ago in the atrium. That's all it needed to be, Maren said. 1 second. I'd have seen it. And after that I'd have had to sleep in that house. She had left with her purse, her phone off, and cash. She'd gone by bus. She had not touched a card because everything with a card on it had his name behind it, and his mother's hand somewhere near the name. She stayed in a rooming house near Coxwell for the first month with a chair under the doorknob, and she stopped sleeping properly and never really started again. He wanted badly to tell her he'd have believed her. He didn't say it. He had one decent instinct left, and it was that. When she corrected me at dinners, Maren said, I used to look at you, I know. Every time. I'd look at you and I'd wait, I know. When she told your golf people I was lucky you never asked for a prenup. That was a Tuesday too, isn't that funny? I looked at you across that table and you laughed. Not a big laugh. Just enough to be part of the room. Callum shut his eyes. When I said your mother didn't like me, you said she needed time. When I said she'd cancelled my name off the reservation, you said it was probably the restaurant. When I stopped going, you said I was being sensitive. Maren, you didn't know, she said. You've been sitting there for 10 minutes trying to figure out how to say you didn't know. He opened his eyes. You knew. You chose not to look at it, because looking at it was going to cost you something, and I was cheaper. There was no anger in it. He could have survived anger. It was the flatness, the way she reported it, chart style, a documented finding that took him apart. He said, I should have protected you. And Maren Doyle laughed, one broken syllable of it. Everybody says that, she said, afterward, when it's free. He got up and walked to the far wall so that he would not fall apart in front of her, because he understood. Dimly, newly, the way a man understands a language he's only ever read. That if he broke down now she'd end up comforting him, and she had spent 11 months with nobody comforting her, and he was not going to make her pay that toll on top of everything else. When he came back to the table he asked the only question left, why are you here? Maren looked at him, and for the first time all night something in her face was not tired. You think I'm here by accident, she said. You're mopping a floor in my hospital. I'm mopping a floor in this hospital, she said. Ask me why this one. Wait, there are 11 private clinics and 4 hospitals in this city where I could have pushed a scrubber. She said, I applied to 1 nights. Because nights are the only shift where housekeeping does the 4th floor. She let it sit. He didn't get there. She watched him not get there, and then she said it. Health records is on the 4th floor, the physical vault. The pre-2019 paper files that were never digitized when your integration project ran out of money. I read about it in your own annual report in a library on a public computer at 11 o'clock at night. The room seemed to tilt very slightly. That assessment, Maren said, was created in your system. Whoever generated it used a template with a document control number in the footer, which means somewhere in that vault there is a signed original with Julian Vance's wet signature and a date stamp, and there is an intake log that says I was never in that building. You can't fabricate a patient out of nothing, Callum. You can only fabricate a page. The page has to live somewhere. He could not speak. I've been in there 11 times, she said. I clean it. I sign the log to clean it. I've been photographing the Index 1 folder tab at a time on a phone I bought at a Shoppers with cash. And I have 3 shifts left in that section, and then I was going to walk into a legal aid office on College Street with the whole thing. She lifted her chin. I have a lawyer. Her name is Hannah Bauscha. I met her at a free clinic and I waited 4 hours to talk to her for 11 minutes, and she told me exactly what I needed, and I have been getting it. Callum stared at his wife. You weren't hiding, he said. No, Maren said. I was working, and every single thing in that gala, the lilies, the quartet, the limestone with his family's name on it, reorganized itself around that sentence and became obscene. 3 shifts, he said. 3 shifts, and the baby Fatima has her Tuesdays and Thursdays. I pay her in groceries. She won't take money. Maren's voice caught once and she pinned it down. I nurse her at 6 in the morning and I sleep from 7 to 2. I have never once been late for this job. I have never called in sick. I have a written record of employment. I have pay stubs. Her eyes came up, because I knew what your mother would try to call me. And I have spent 11 months making it impossible. Callum Renwick put his elbows on that laminate table and his face in his hands, and he stayed there while the kettle ticked and the laundry thumped underneath them. And for the first time in his life he understood that his wife had never needed rescuing. She'd needed a witness, and he hadn't shown up. Someone knocked on the doorframe. An older nurse stood there in the green of the surgical floor, holding 2 coffees. She looked at Maren and her face went complicated. They said there was a thing in the atrium, she said. You all right, love? I'm okay, Ruth. The nurse turned to Callum. She read the tuxedo. She read the name badge that wasn't there and didn't need to be. Ruth Adeyemi, she said. I've worked here 19 years. She set 1 coffee down in front of Maren, and then she looked directly at the man whose family name was on the building. She trained me. 1999 at the Grace, on nights. There is a boy alive in Scarborough because of what she did in a hallway with no attending, and you people put her on a floor buffer. Then Ruth Adeyemi walked out. Callum sat with that. Then he took out his phone. Maren's whole body changed. Who are you calling? Not for control, he said fast. I'm asking, you can say no. She waited. 3 shifts is 11 days, he said. In 11 days my mother finds out where you are. She'll have heard about the atrium by midnight. And Julian Vance walks into that vault with a cart and a shredder and a very good reason to be there. And everything you built for 11 months is gone in 1 afternoon. Maren's hand went still on the coffee cup. You don't need me to save you, Callum said. I understand that now. I'm not offering it. What I can do is close the door. How I own the door. She looked at him for a long moment. Do it in front of me, she said, so he did. He called the head of security first and told him to seal the 4th floor records vault effective immediately, physical lock and badge log, no exceptions, and to preserve the last 24 months of access records to an off-site copy tonight. When the man started to ask a question, Callum said, do it now and then call me back and tell me it's done. He called the chair of the board next. Then he called Renwick Health's outside counsel at 9:40 on a Saturday night and said the words forged clinical documentation and College of Physicians and Surgeons and heard, on the other end, a chair scrape. Then he called the house. Change every lock tonight, he said. Front side garage, the pool house, wipe the codes, reset the remotes. A pause on the no, Callum said. My mother is not to be given a copy. Another pause. Because I said so. He hung up and set the phone face down on the laminate and found that his hands were not steady at all. Maren was crying, not the way people cry in films. 2 tears wiped away fast and hard with the heel of her hand, as if she resented them for the delay they caused. I'm not asking you to come. I know what that house is now. I know what it's been. Good, she said. I'm asking if I can meet her. His wife looked at him for a very long time. Not tonight, she said. Okay. She's got a cold. Okay. And I haven't forgiven you, Maren said. I want to be extremely clear. I'm not forgiving you tonight because you finally used your voice in a room full of donors. It shouldn't have cost 200 witnesses. No, Callum said. It shouldn't have. She stood up slowly, one hand on the table. He didn't take her arm. He moved the chair back with his foot so she'd have room, and something in her face registered it, and she said nothing, and that was all right. At the staff exit she stopped and unclipped her name tag. M. Doe Style Environmentals, and looked at it in her palm, and then she set it on the metal shelf by the door. Outside it was -14 and the salt on the sidewalk crunched like sugar. Maren shivered. Callum took off his coat and held it out and waited and did not put it on her, and after a moment she took it and put it on herself. It swallowed her. If she's there, Maren said, looking at the black car at the curb. She isn't, she won't be. And if she calls me, he said, I'm not answering. Not until you and Ren are somewhere she can't reach. Maren got into the car with one hand on the frame. Callum got in beside her and left a hand's width between them. And the city went by, the streetcar wires, the shuttered variety stores, the salt-white streets of a February he would remember for the rest of his life. Somewhere near Broadview her hand moved across the seat. Not far, he put his beside it. Their fingers did not lace, they touched, and that was everything. What happened after took 9 weeks and it was not cinematic. The forensic document examiner confirmed what Maren Doyle had known on a Tuesday in March with $420 in a jar. The assessment had been generated on a Renwick Health workstation, backdated and printed on a Thursday when Dr. Julian Vance's office had a clinic day, and there was no intake, no consent form, no billing, no patient. He had signed it. He had done it for a woman who had funded his research chair for 6 years, and had never once made a request he could refuse. The College of Physicians and Surgeons revoked his license in the fall. Rosalind Renwick did not go to prison. Callum wants people to know that, because he thinks the version where she does is a story people tell themselves so they don't have to build anything harder. She had good lawyers. What she had instead was a Wednesday morning in a boardroom on the 11th floor, with 14 people she had appointed, and a folder placed on the table in front of her by her son, who did not raise his voice. She was removed from the board of the Renwick Foundation. Her name came off the pavilion. There is a family court order now with her name on it, and specific language about distance, and Callum signed the affidavit himself and did not shake. She told him he was destroying his family. He said, I'm building one. She has not spoken to him since. He thought that would kill him. It turns out that a man can carry that, and sleep, and get up, and make oatmeal for a small person who bangs her spoon on the tray. He met Ren on a Wednesday, in Fatima Nazari's kitchen on the Danforth with the radio on. She was 5 months old and she had his mother's eyebrows and Maren's exact, unimpressed stare, and she screamed the whole time, and he held her badly, and Maren stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and did not help him, and when he finally got the burp out he looked up and his wife was crying and furious about it. They did not move back into the house, they sold it. There is an apartment now on the 2nd floor of a walk-up near Greenwood with a radiator that clanks and one closet that doesn't close. Maren went back to nursing in September part-time nights. Callum makes the lunches. He is not good at it. He is learning. She has not taken his name back. They are on paper still married and, in every way that counts, still negotiating. Some nights she looks at him across that small kitchen, and he can see her deciding again whether to stay, and he has learned to let her decide it without arguing, because a decision you argue someone into is not a decision. He asked her once, in April, what he could have done. Any of it, she said. At the prenup joke. On the phone with your mother, one single time. When I was standing right there. She wasn't cruel about it. She was reading a chart. You didn't need to be brave once, Callum. Being brave once is easy. You needed to be brave in 100 small rooms where nobody was watching. He thinks about that on the streetcar. He thinks about it in board meetings. He thinks about it every time he feels the old, familiar, wonderfully comfortable pull to let something go, to keep the peace, to smooth it over, to say she didn't mean it that way. And he understands now that peace bought with somebody else's silence is not peace at all. It's just a debt in her name. Real love is not the grand sentence in the atrium with 200 people watching. Real love is the small correction at the dinner table when it costs you the whole evening. It's the phone call you make while she's in the room, so she can hear you make it. And sometimes the person on her knees with a paper towel, picking up your broken glass, is the strongest person in the building, and everyone in it knew and mopped past her anyway. Ren is walking now. She holds a fistful of her mother's scrub top and steers. If you've ever had to stand alone in your own kitchen while someone told you that you'd never be believed, say so in the comments. And stay close to this channel. Because in the spring, Rosalind Renwick's lawyers filed something none of them expected, and Maren Doyle had to decide what she was willing to lose to keep her daughter.